Looks like we're live. Alrighty. Welcome to this afternoon's session on Agile Can't Get Analytics Finished. This is an idea I've been toying with in my mind, and I'm going to make the argument that how we think about data analytics is important. First of all, my name is Aash Viswanathan. I'm a data scientist, currently work at Atlassian. I've been working with data day-to-day and with data stakeholders day-to-day for pretty much my entire career. And I've worked in different industries at different scales and supported a lot of different functions. And if you'd like to connect with me, I like LinkedIn. Hit me up, send me a DM or InMail. With that said, I want to kind of walk through the agenda a little bit. I have two propositions. One is that there are two ways to think about analytics. I've seen both and I've worked with both. The other proposition is it doesn't matter which way you think about analytics, it's endless. There is no end. Based on which we get two types of analytics stakeholders and two types of analytics programs. And I'll walk through some of the practical implications of these two styles of thinking. So let's begin with what are the two ways to think about analytics. Now, this is definitely in the realm of philosophy, but it's really simple. Some people think about analytics as a collection of things like reports, dashboards, infrastructure, you name it, things. There are others who think about analytics as activity-oriented. So it's a series of activities or events that people and things perform. And these are, like analysis, science, engineering, all your like process names and job title names that show up here. So pretty simple. I'm sure everyone knows somebody who thinks of analytics in either one of these ways. But I want to emphasize that regardless of which way you think about analytics, there's no end. If you assume that your business is going to go on forever, you're going to have to do analytics forever. There is no way to get around this. The only scenario when you're done with analytics is when you're done with business. So it doesn't matter if you think about analytics as objects or events, you're stuck with the endless nature of data analytics. Now, why am I talking about this today? There are three reasons why I think this topic is important. I will argue that it changes how we think about analytics changes the conversation about business value. And business value is ultimately what we want out of any analytics. How we think about analytics also has implications for how we treat the people who work on analytics. And the other implication and something that I've personally experienced is when these two types of people who think differently about analytics kind of work together, it can result in some pretty like high friction situations because they have different understandings of reality. With that said, let's look at the two types of analytics stakeholders. And there's no right or wrong here. There's two types. There's two ways of thinking about it, and they each have their uses and their pros and cons. So with the object-oriented stakeholders, typically the relationship with the analyst is treated as kind of transactional. So the focus is on the analytics things, the reports, the dashboards. That's what the analysts are responsible for generating. And the whole strategy here is centered around protecting executive time and saying analytics is a series of things that we give executives so that they can make fast decisions and better decisions and make their lives easier. So this is a totally valid approach. There's another approach that's where the entire model is built on the activity. So instead of a transactional partnership, is more of like a conversational partnership. And the direct business impact also happens kind of more at the stakeholder level where they use the insights from analytics as an ingredient in their decision making. The other difference I would say is it's centered around focusing on protecting analyst time. So basically saying, hey, analysts, if you are going to do the same thing every week, I'd rather you spend a little bit of time to automate it and then save your own time in the future, something like that. So two types of analytics stakeholders Let's dive into these two real quick. I want to remind you the first type, you think about analytics as things. The second type, you think about analytics as objects. So let's look at the world if we treat analytics as objects. So here we have three entities. You have the business who compensates your, I'm going to call them analysts, but you know, we're all the same, data scientists, data engineers, same fraternity. And the relationship between the business and analysts is pretty well defined. What happens here, if we think about analytics as things, is that the stakeholders kind of view this relationship as you give analysts tasks and you get reports and dashboards back out. And kind of, if you think about where the business value is hiding here, it's really in these two arrows. So these two parties are responsible for parts of the business value. And the way you can drive business impact from analytics here is, number one, you train your stakeholders to assign more valuable tasks to analysts. So you make sure the analysts are, working on kind of the most productive thing. Number two, you train your analysts to deliver more useful and more valuable outputs to the business. Pretty simple. In practice, what I've seen is the kinds of scenarios in which this type of model happens is where typically the level of analytics infrastructure is low. So, there's a lot of manual reporting. And in these scenarios, the analysts are also kind of typically responsible for saying where to go next, which can be, so that's just like an extra detail that I've observed in my experience. Now let's look at the event-oriented stakeholder model. If we treat analytics as activities, here's some of the PMs I worked with do this really well. They kind of look at this relationship and then they say, okay, now my relationship with the analyst is where the business has rented the analyst's time. I am allocating some of that time to do these tasks. And there may be some outputs, but really what I'm looking for is knowledge that can help me drive business decisions. So it's a completely different way of thinking about analytics. And it does have its pros and cons as well. Now let's just take a moment to talk about how business value works with the event-oriented stakeholder model. You still got to assign better tasks. Analysts still got to make better dashboards. But over here, you can also drive business value by actually optimizing to minimize the analyst's time spent on doing things long term. And also, you get business value out of these decisions that have kind of an intangible contribution from the analyst's work through insights. All right. So let's just kind of look at an allegorical example, just something for fun. Imagine you're driving to the store. In this picture, you're an analytics stakeholder. Your car that you're driving represents the business. So you're in the car to go somewhere, and then the speedometer on your car, the dial that's telling you the speed, that represents an analytics output. So imagine you're driving to the store and you notice the speedometer stopped operating. So you pull up at a garage and you talk to a mechanic, and let's pretend the mechanic is your analyst. So let's look at two scenarios, the object-oriented one and the event-oriented one, or activity-oriented one. So in scenario one, the stakeholder says something like, hey, I need my speedometer working. So remember, they're concerned about the thing. So I need my speedometer working to get to the store. And when they hear that it's going to take some time to kind of order and replace the parts, their priorities are, they need it now. So they need it quick and dirty. And so the benefit of using this approach is you get something working now, but you're likely to come back to the mechanic with the same problem because you asked for something quick and dirty. So the pros and cons here are pretty clear. Pros, you save time right now. Cons, you lose time in the future. In scenario two, it's totally different. Your stakeholders typically not in a rush. They're typically there and they're concerned about their car. They're like, hey, while you're in there, can you check the oil and everything else? And really they're trying to save them and you time in the future. And this has its pros and cons too, which I will get to subsequently. But I just want to kind of go back and just highlight the differences of how these two conversations would go if you think about your analytics as a thing as opposed to like an activity. So just comparing these two kind of styles of thinking about analytics a little more concretely, what I found is that typically the object-oriented way, which is thinking, which is kind of, it's short-term, high-frequency, very reporting-oriented, really scales like measurement in the short term. It's really hard to scale insights because most of your analyst time is usually going towards measurement. And typically, you want to use the object-oriented method when your infrastructure is kind of not in great shape. But what happens with people in this model is that people are an input for the output of measurements. And so you kind of go through people faster in this model. With the activity-oriented model, you kind of have like a little bit of the inverse on the business value side. It's easier to scale insights because you're investing in infrastructure. And actually, I would change the measurement to also it scales. It does not scale in the short term, is what I mean here. Measurement does scale under activity-oriented analytics as well. What I found in general is that the teams I've seen that think about analytics in the second way tend to have lower stress, lower attrition, just my observations. But on the flip side, since you're investing in heavily in infrastructure and people for this way of operating, you'll be spending more money. I want to comment on the possibility of there being hybrid structures of these two models. It's entirely possible. I've seen it happen. I've seen two different stakeholders within the same organization think of analytics differently. It's really at the stakeholder and analyst level. So anything's possible. I do want to say that there are implications of these two ways of thinking about analytics. And the implications are with how we think about value, how we treat others, and how the social interactions in the workplace happen. At the executive or top level of the business, I would say your concern is probably do you have a definition of how your organization thinks or wants to think about data analytics? If you find this as an important topic, I recommend actually defining it and socializing it. In terms of ethics and trust, I think this is something I've heard anecdotally with folks I know in the industry. But it's pretty common to, as an analyst, get recruited to a job, with the intent to ask the analyst to work on something exciting and long term. But because of like various factors, like the stack isn't mature or there aren't enough analysts or whatever, you just wind up putting them on the other kind of analytics, which is probably not what they were expecting. And then in terms of like stakeholder harmony, I mean, like maintaining stakeholder relationships is a really important part of any analyst's job. But if you get a stakeholder who thinks about analytics completely differently than you do, it can be really challenging to bridge that communication gap, because what you actually have are two different conceptions of reality. And you really need to bridge that before you can make meaningful progress on anything else. That's it. Thanks for attending. I knew this would be short, so I'll open it up for any questions and discussions. Okay, looks like Q&A. Somebody, thanks, Liz, for your comment. Liz says this is well put, and nice work. Alrighty. All right, that's it. I'll see you around in another event.